On a forgotten moon covered in junk and shadows, a lonely alien girl with a powerful gift crosses paths with a crashed human stranger, and what starts as a simple act of kindness turns into a fight for survival, belonging, and a hope that could light up the darkest corner of the galaxy. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe to this channel and show your support with a thumbs up by liking the video. Now let's move toward this wonderful story. The moon of Decra 9 was not like the others. It didn't shine with beauty or wonder. It was called the Moon of Lost Things, and for good reason. Floating far from the busy parts of the galaxy, it had become a place for everything forgotten. Broken satellites, old starships, empty cargo containers, and machines too damaged to fix. Everything ended up here. The surface was gray and lifeless, covered in scrap metal and dust. There were no trees, no animals, no bright cities. Just silence, rust, and echoes of things long abandoned. But someone lived here. Her name was Neva. She was a quiet girl from a species called the Lumari, known for their gift of sensing emotions. But among her people, Neva was different. She felt too much. While others learned to control or ignore feelings, Neva couldn't. She cried when others were sad. She grew weak when people around her were angry. To her clan, this wasn't a gift. It was a problem. So they sent her away, and she ended up on Decra 9, alone. Neva had made a home inside a broken ship that had once been a scout vessel. Its walls were bent and burned, but it kept out the wind. She had gathered things from the scrap fields, old blankets, a cooking ring, a few working lights powered by a cracked solar cell. It wasn't much, but it was hers. She spent her days gathering pieces of scrap to trade with the rare visitors who came to the moon looking for salvage. They didn't talk to her much, and she was fine with that. She didn't expect kindness from strangers anymore. Then one day, something strange happened. A ship fell from the sky. It wasn't large, just a one-person cargo craft. Neva saw it from the ridge above her shelter. The sky had cracked open with fire as the ship streaked through the clouds, leaving a trail of smoke behind. It hit the ground hard, skidding across metal debris before disappearing behind the eastern hills. Neva's heart jumped. Crashes happened, sometimes but never this close. She stood still, listening. She could feel it in the air, pain, confusion, fear. Someone was alive in that wreck. She waited a few hours before she went to look. Moving quietly through the wreckage, she followed the crash path until she found the ship. It was torn open. Its side burned and twisted. And there, lying on a broken panel, was a human. He looked young, maybe 20 or 25. His face was pale and blood ran down his forehead. His arm was bent the wrong way. His suit was damaged and sparks flickered near his belt. But he was breathing. Neva felt his pain before she heard it. It pressed into her chest, heavy and sharp, like she was the one who had crashed. She stepped closer. The man opened his eyes, slowly, and looked at her. For a moment, neither of them moved. Neva had never seen a human up close. She had read about them, seen recordings, but never spoken to one. They were fast-moving, emotional, and curious. She was scared, but something about the way he looked at her made her stay. He tried to speak. "Water," he said in a dry, cracked voice. Then he pointed weakly to his mouth. Neva nodded and ran to the small pouch she always carried. She opened the flask and gently lifted his head. He drank slowly, then let out a shaky breath. "Thanks," he whispered. She didn't know what to say. She only knew a few human words. Her voice came out as a soft hum, the sound her people used to show care. He looked confused but smiled a little. She helped him sit up, then noticed how bad his arm was. She needed to move him before the scavengers came. The gangs who roamed Decra 9 were dangerous. They didn't care about kindness or life. They cared about power, trade, and credits. If they saw a wounded human, they would sell him. Humans were rare here, and that made them valuable. Neva couldn't let that happen. She didn't know why she cared, but she did. She led him back to her shelter, moving slowly so he wouldn't fall. He leaned on her, and she felt his fear slowly shift to something softer. Trust, maybe. She had never felt that from anyone before. Inside the broken scout ship, she made him a bed from spare blankets and covered him with a tarp to keep the cold out. For days she stayed close. She cleaned his wounds with cloth dipped in warm water. She crushed herbs into paste and spread them on his cuts. He tried to talk sometimes, using simple words. Name, help, pain, fix. She learned his name was Joran. He was a cargo engineer from the Outer Reach Coalition, a worker, not a soldier. His ship had been hit by debris during a delivery run, and the system had pulled him into Dekra 9's gravity before he could escape. Neva didn't tell him her story. She wasn't ready, but every time she looked at him, she felt something inside her stir, a kind of warmth she thought she'd forgotten. Joran didn't treat her like she was broken or strange. He just looked at her like she was someone who mattered, and for the first time in a long time, Neva felt something she hadn't dared to hope for. Connection. But far beyond the shelter in the scavenger camps across the rusting plains, others had seen the smoke trail. Whispers spread. A human had crashed. And on Dekra 9, that meant one thing, and trouble was coming. The nights on Dekra 9 were long and cold. Wind slipped through the cracks in the wreckage, carrying the sharp scent of rust and smoke. Inside the shelter, Joran slept restlessly, his bandaged arm resting on a folded coat. Neva sat beside him, wrapped in a thin blanket, her eyes wide and alert. She could feel it again, something distant, but growing stronger. Unease, the kind that made her heart beat faster without knowing why. She didn't need to hear footsteps to know someone was coming. Her gift told her the truth long before her ears could. Over the next few days, she and Joran worked quietly to survive. She scavenged during the early mornings, when the air was still and the gang stayed hidden. She returned with metal pieces, wires, and dried food she had hidden in old crates. Joran, even with one arm, began pulling apart a broken transmitter he found in a rusted comms tower nearby. His fingers moved slowly, carefully. He had a soft way of speaking when he worked. Neva didn't understand every word, but she liked the sound of his voice. One afternoon, he pointed to the broken transmitter on the floor and then tapped his ear. "Signal," he said. "Help." "Maybe." Neva nodded. She didn't know if anyone would come, but watching Joran's hope made her believe it might be possible. She fetched tools for him, held pieces steady while he soldered wires, and sometimes just sat close when he needed to rest. Their days grew into a rhythm. Joran taught her small words like wire, fire, and sleep. In return, Neva taught him sounds from her language, soft hums and clicks that had meanings no human had ever learned. They laughed once when Joran tried to copy one of her musical tones and ended up sneezing instead. For a moment, it didn't matter they were from different worlds. They were just two lost people trying to understand each other. But shadows were always nearby. Far across the junk fields, Thorn and his gang watched through cracked goggles. Thorn was a lean man with a sharp face and colder eyes. He had lived on Dekra 9 for years, building a life from taking what others couldn't keep. To him, kindness was weakness. So when he saw a human working alongside a Lumari girl, he didn't see a story. He saw profit. Humans were rare on Dekra 9. People would pay a lot to buy one, even more if he brought in a Lumari with powers. He sent 2 of his scouts to follow them, staying just far enough away not to be seen. Every night, Neva felt the pressure in her chest grow stronger. Fear, not hers, but someone else's. It hovered nearby like smoke, thick and choking. She began sleeping less. Joran noticed and asked her with a concerned look, "Safe?" She shook her head and whispered one word, "Watch." That evening, they didn't light a fire. Instead, Joran and Neva sat in silence, tools spread between them, the transmitter half fixed. The stars above blinked through holes in the ceiling, cold and distant. Joran looked up and whispered, "Hope they see us." Neva didn't reply, but her fingers touched his lightly. It was the first time she had done that. Joran looked surprised but smiled. Even though she barely spoke, Neva had learned how to say so much without words. The next day, Thorne's gang came closer. Neva saw their shadows from a high ridge where she searched for parts. She ducked low, heart pounding. She could feel their thoughts, greedy, eager, violent. They had found them. She rushed back to the shelter, running fast over metal and gravel. "We go," she said when she arrived, breathless. Joran stood, still tired, still hurting, but ready. "Where?" he asked. Neva didn't know. There were few places left to hide, but they couldn't stay. Thorne wouldn't ask nicely. Joran picked up the broken transmitter, wrapping it in cloth. Neva gathered their things, the flask, the herbs, the small energy lamp, and they slipped into the night. They found a new hiding place deeper in the wreck fields, inside a broken mining crawler buried halfway in sand. It wasn't much, but it had a roof and walls. For 2 days they didn't speak much. Joran worked on the transmitter while Neva kept watch. She could feel the hunters getting closer. The pressure in her chest grew until it hurt to breathe. Her gift was getting stronger, not weaker. She started to feel Joran's emotions more clearly now, too. His quiet fear, his deep tiredness, his strange respect for her. Then, it happened. The gang found them. It was early morning when footsteps echoed outside the crawler. Thorne's voice broke the silence like a blade. "We know you're in there. Give us the human and maybe we won't take both of you." Joran grabbed a metal pipe with his good hand. Neva stood in front of him, shaking but steady. She could feel the heat of anger from the raiders pressing in like fire. Her hands began to glow faintly, a soft silver blue. Joran stared at her. "What is that?" he asked softly. "I feel," she whispered, "too much." The raiders burst in, shouting. Neva closed her eyes. The pressure inside her cracked like a dam. A wave of emotion poured out. Not rage, not hate, but something deeper. Pain, fear, loneliness. All of it pushed outward like a storm. Thorne and his gang stumbled, clutching their heads. Some dropped their weapons. One screamed. Another fell to his knees, crying. Joran watched in silence. He had never seen anything like it. When it was over, the gang had fled. The silence that followed felt heavy but also clean. Neva collapsed to the ground, breathing hard. Joran knelt beside her. "You saved us," he said. She looked up, eyes wet. "You stayed." He nodded. "Of course I did." And for the first time, Neva believed someone might stay, not because they needed her, but because they saw her. The days after the attack felt different. The air around the shelter was quieter, but not in a peaceful way. It was the kind of silence that made you hold your breath without realizing it. Neva moved more carefully now, her eyes always watching the shadows. She knew Thorne's gang wasn't done. People like him didn't walk away from something they wanted. They would be back, and next time, they'd be angrier and more prepared. Joran tried to keep his focus on the transmitter. He sat by the corner of the crawler, tools spread out around him like puzzle pieces. His injured arm still hurt, but he worked through it. Each wire he reconnected, each signal he tested brought him one step closer to hope. He wasn't even sure who would hear the signal. Maybe a passing cargo vessel, maybe a patrol ship from the outer systems, maybe no one. But trying mattered. Neva helped him in every way she could. She handed him parts, kept the power cell charged, and scanned the wreckage fields for scavenger movements. But something inside her had shifted. She no longer felt only fear when she used her gift. Now, there, was strength. What she had done, pushing back Thorne's gang using her emotions, was something she had never believed possible. Her powers had always made her feel weak and different. But now she wondered if that difference was the very thing that kept them alive. Joran noticed the change in her. She walked taller. She didn't flinch as much. One night, as they sat eating from a metal bowl of heated rations, he looked at her carefully. "You're strong," he said simply. Neva didn't answer at first. She looked down at her hands, then back at him. "I was always told Feeling was wrong, she said quietly. But you didn't run. He smiled. Feeling is what kept us breathing. I'd rather have someone who feels too much than not at all. The next morning they managed something close to a miracle. After days of trial and error, the transmitter lit up with a flickering green light. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to send a signal. Joran pressed the switch, and a soft hum filled the air as the machine began to broadcast. "This is Joran Hale of the Outer Reach Coalition," he said into the mic. "Emergency signal crashed on Dekra 9, coordinates attached. 2 survivors. Requesting rescue." They repeated the message every hour for the rest of the day. Neva didn't know if anyone would hear it, but she kept watching the sky anyway. That night, she didn't feel completely alone for the first time in years, but trouble wasn't finished with them. As the moon's light shifted across the sky, a new shadow returned to their hiding place. This time it was a different group of raiders, rougher, meaner, and more heavily armed. Thorn had gathered more fighters, and now they came with one goal: to take what they had failed to get the first time. The attack began without warning. Explosions rocked the edge of the crawler, sending metal pieces flying. Joran grabbed the transmitter and held it close as Neva pulled him behind a wall. Shouting filled the air, men calling orders, footsteps closing in, weapons charging. Neva's body shook, but she forced herself to stand. She looked at Joran, who was ready to fight even with one good arm. "We hold together," he said. Neva nodded. "Together." As the raiders charged, something inside Neva opened again. The storm of emotions around her was thick: rage, greed, fear. But this time she didn't just react. She guided it. Her hands glowed brighter than ever before, the blue light pulsing with rhythm, like a heartbeat. She stepped into the open, her voice rising in a soft hum that echoed across the scrap walls. The attackers stumbled as the air shifted. Their anger turned into confusion. Their hatred melted into doubt. One by one they froze in place, unable to understand the sudden weight pressing on their minds. Neva pushed harder, her own emotions pouring into the light. Her loneliness, her pain, her wish for peace. It hit the raiders like a wave. Some dropped their weapons, others fell to their knees. Even Thorn, proud and furious, stepped back, clutching his head. Joran watched from behind the wall, eyes wide with awe. She wasn't just protecting them, she was changing the battlefield. Without firing a shot, without saying a word, she had broken their will to fight. When the last of them ran, limping and silent, Neva dropped to her knees, exhausted. Joran rushed to her side, lifting her gently. "That was incredible," he whispered. She didn't speak. She just rested her head against his shoulder, breathing hard, letting the silence settle. Later, as they repaired the damage and made their shelter safe again, a small light blinked on the transmitter. Joran leaned forward, checking the signal. His eyes widened. "Someone heard us," he said. "They're coming." Neva stared at the blinking light, not sure what to feel. She had spent so long believing no one would ever come for her. Now, rescue was on the way, but so was change. She looked at Joran, who smiled through his weariness. "You're not just different," he said. "You're needed." Neva didn't know what the future would bring, but for the first time, she looked forward to finding out. In the wreckage of a forgotten moon, a small light had finally begun to shine. The rescue ship arrived just after dawn. A silver streak in the gray sky, it cut through the dust clouds like a promise. Neva stood at the edge of the wreck field, watching it come closer, her heart pounding with a mix of fear and hope. Joran stood beside her, still bruised and limping but smiling. The blinking light on the transmitter had worked. Someone had listened. Now, help was here. The ship landed with a gentle hum, its lights scanning the ground. A ramp lowered, and figures, in clean uniforms, stepped out, rescuers from the Outer Reach Coalition. Their boots crunched against metal and dust as they moved toward Joran. One of them, a woman with short hair and kind eyes, called out, "Joran Hale?" Joran raised his hand. "That's me," he said. Then he looked back at Neva. "And this is Neva. She saved my life." The rescuers looked at Neva with curiosity. No one stepped back in fear. No one raised a weapon. One of them even nodded at her. Neva wasn't used to being seen like that. She wasn't a threat or a problem or a mistake. She was someone worth thanking. That simple moment felt like a quiet miracle. They led them into the ship, offering warm food, clean water, and medical care. The lights inside were soft, the air fresh and easy to breathe. Neva sat in a cushioned seat, holding a hot drink between her hands. It felt strange, like she had stepped into another world. She listened, as Joran told the rescuers everything about the crash, the scavengers, the battles, and her gift. They listened closely. One of the medics, after hearing it all, said to her, "You have something special. People like you don't come around often." Neva didn't know what to say. No one had ever used the word special for her without it sounding like a bad thing. Now it felt warm, almost real. As the ship lifted off from Decra 9, she looked through the window one last time. The junk moon grew smaller and smaller, a place full of sadness and survival, but also the place where she had found the first person who truly saw her. The days that followed were filled with learning. Joran stayed close, helping her adjust to the strange world of the humans. He showed her how to speak more words, how to use Earth tools, and how to understand simple screens and buttons. The Coalition gave her space to rest and think. They didn't force her to talk about her past. They just let her be. But not everyone understood her. Some people stared too long. Others whispered when she walked past. They saw her glowing hands and remembered only the fear. Neva could feel their emotions, sharp and cold like broken glass. It hurt, but she didn't turn away. Joran reminded her, "Not everyone will understand. That doesn't mean you don't belong." One day, a group of strangers gathered near the spaceport shouting about danger. "Aliens with power shouldn't be here," one of them yelled. Their anger rolled through the air like a storm. Neva stood still, shaking. She wanted to run, but she remembered the way Joran had looked at her, how he had stood beside her on Decra 9. So this time, she didn't hide. She stepped forward. Her hands glowed softly, and her voice was steady. "I don't want to harm anyone," she said. "I only want to help." At first, no one moved. Then a young woman stepped from the crowd. Her voice was unsure but curious. "Why should we trust you?" Neva didn't answer with words. She let her powers speak instead. A quiet wave of calm spread from her, soft and gentle. The shouting slowed. People began to breathe more evenly. The fear lessened. The young woman nodded. "Maybe we were wrong," she said. Others murmured in agreement. A few even offered Neva food and kind smiles. Joran stood nearby, proud but quiet. He knew what it had taken for her to stand there. She had come so far. Later, the Coalition invited Neva to join a new mission, one where her gifts could help others. Villages torn by fear, teams working in dangerous places, people who needed peace but didn't know how to find it. Neva said yes. Her first mission was to a quiet farming village that had been struggling with conflict. The people there were scared and divided. Neva could feel the sadness the moment she stepped off the ship. But she didn't back away. She moved through the village, healing old wounds not with medicine but with empathy. She touched a crying child's hand and helped them sleep. She calmed an old man shaking with fear. She sat with families who hadn't spoken in weeks, helping them understand each other again. Some were afraid of her at first, but slowly, day by day, they saw who she really was. Not a threat, not a mystery, just Neva. When the time came to leave, the village gathered to say goodbye. An elder took her hand and said, "You brought light to this place, thank you." Neva blinked back tears. "I was once lost," she said. "Now I help others find the way." Back on the ship, Joran met her at the door. "You changed them," he said. Neva smiled. "They changed me too." As they flew into the stars, Neva looked ahead. She knew the galaxy was still big and sometimes unkind, but she wasn't afraid, because home wasn't a place made of walls or lights. Home was a feeling, a place where she was accepted, where she was needed, where she was seen. And for the first time, Neva believed she was not just surviving. She was meant to shine.